Hello, my name is Tamika Brown, and I'm the director of ECMC's The College Place, located in Richmond, Virginia. I'm excited to share some really great information for students who have housing instability, as well as students who are in care. This talk is going to give information about how to best prepare for college, just kind of giving some really helpful insight around what the experience is like for students in these two distinct populations. While there are distinct populations, there are a lot of similarities in the college access space when in terms of like opportunities. So that's why I included both groups together on this particular talk. But I hope this information is going to be helpful for students who are in these particular populations. So today I'm going to talk about give some high-level information around definition, so that it could be helpful as we move through the talk to better understand what are the population of students, what are the terms used to define individuals in these groups, and then some legislation that exists in support of them. Also, unpacking dependency determination and independent status, talking about federal and state financial aid that is available for these students, some special considerations and programs that exist that support students who are at risk, that could be beneficial for students who experience housing instability, and also other programs that exist that support foster youth. Also, I'm going to provide some tips for applying for college, and then what should be the next steps for a student in one of these populations who are just trying to figure out how to prepare for college. So first of all, why homeless and foster youth? Well, according to the U.S. Department of Education, 400,000 children and youth are in foster care at any given time. And that's a huge number. And 20,000 of those youth are aged out of foster care. So that means they've reached an age where they are no longer supported through the foster care system. So those students those particular youth are critical because they need a lot of support in transitioning to adulthood. And so I really think this information is going to be useful for them, particularly if they're interested in pursuing post-secondary education. 63% of foster youth graduated from Virginia high schools in 2017, 2018, but 60% of students experiencing homelessness graduated. So this is less than what the average is across the state. So these particular populations of students need additional attention from those of us in the college access community to get them across the finish line through high school, but to and through college as well. So we recognize for these two distinct populations of students, there are quite a few barriers to higher education above and beyond what may exist for the traditional student. One, these students feel pressure to pursue paid work and to earn income, more so than other students because many of them don't have a lot of solid financial support from the adults that are around them. They're in survival mode, so they're trying to figure out where their next food is coming from, how they're going to keep shelter. And so because they're thinking about survival mode, they're not necessarily thinking about college as a realistic option for them. They have very limited family resources, and those resources can come in the form of emotional, physical, legal, or financial, but regardless, is limited. So they're having to grow up a lot younger than a lot of young people, grow up a lot younger with a lot fewer resources. They perceive higher education to be a luxury, something that people who have affluence or wealth can afford, not necessarily a person who's struggling to survive from day to day like them. They have a reluctance to seek out resources because people ask a lot of intrusive questions, and many of them don't want to necessarily share their story. They keep that information close to their vest, and so they have a reluctance to even share, to seek out resources for fear of having to self-identify in ways that are uncomfortable for them. They have limited access to technology. Some have phones, many don't. Some have laptops. Some have laptops that are issued from their schools. But regardless, it's limited in comparison to the traditional student who may have a cell phone, who may have their own laptop computer at home and one for school. But because of the limited access to technology, they may not be able to access applications or certain virtual resources that may be available. Lastly, and one big factor is they assume that they cannot afford it, or they have a lack of awareness around financial aid opportunities or programs that are geared towards helping students who are experiencing housing instability and foster youth to and through college. But we're naive. We're not naive about, we're not naive about what all the things that students who are experiencing housing instability and students who are in care have to consider as they are figuring out what's next for them. If they're considering post-secondary education, a lot of things they have to take into account. They have to take into admissions criteria. Many of them are transient and go from school to school. And so being sure that they have taken the sufficient amount of coursework in order to be considered for admissions for school is important. If they've had the time to take an SAT or ACT, prepare for it and take it as well. Proximity to social supports. Again, from the previous slide, I talked about the limited family resources. And so because many of the resources are limited, students really try to stay in close proximity to those resources. And so they consider that as a factor when they're making decisions about post-secondary education. Institutional fit. Is the school a good fit for them? How is the rigor for the particular student? It does provide them prep for their academic and professional goals. So is the school itself a good fit? School culture. Does the school have a school culture that is inclusive or supportive of students who have housing instability and students who are in care? Availability of on-campus housing during breaks is huge. Because many of these students do not have a stable place to stay outside of the college campus once they transition as a college student. So finding a college campus that will allow them to stay on campus or that offers special housing for students who can't go home or who don't have other places to go during breaks is going to be really important. Other unique considerations can vary based on the student. Does the school offer basic needs programs? Does the school offer first generation support? Does the student know someone else who may be enrolled at the school or know someone else who may be interested in going to the school with them? There are a lot of things that they take into consideration, and cost of attendance is only one piece of that puzzle. While it's a huge piece, it is literally only one piece of the puzzle. So before we jump more into this, it's important to kind of frame who are we talking about? What are the populations that we're describing? And so first, homeless as described by the McKinney-Vento Act is an individual who lacks fixed, regular, or adequate housing. That means fixed, meaning it is one place, it does not move. Regular, in that the student can go to this place on a regular basis, so every day. And adequate means that it is appropriate for someone to live in. So that the housing that the student lives in has to be all three, not one or two. It has to be all three. And if it's not all three, then the student is considered homeless and can receive the homeless designation from their school's McKinney-Vento liaison. The student and their parent work with the school and the McKinney-Vento liaison to get this designation. It gives them access to different services and supports. Services and supports that may be available through the school and through DSS. Next, unaccompanied homeless youth, or UHY, are defined as an individual who is not more than 21 years of age, for whom it is not possible to live in a safe environment with a relative, and who have no other safe alternative living arrangement. And so, people who live with families because they don't feel safe. And so they don't live at home. They're unaccompanied. So they're not accompanied by a parent. And so they ran away from home. They're living in another space. So these students can be granted the McKinney-Vento liaison the McKinney-Vento designation through the MV liaison at their schools as well. Getting that designation while they're in high school could be helpful for them qualifying for independent status for financial aid. I'll talk more about that later, but it could be really helpful in helping them to getting the designation in high school helps them to avoid a lot of the barriers that may come later on in them having to provide documents to a college to prove that they are experiencing homelessness. So having a designation in high school is going to be really helpful for them. It's the easiest way, I think. Without this designation in high school, those who are unaccompanied homeless youth, but also like work and are self-sustaining, must provide documentation to the school's financial aid office, who use professional judgment to determine whether or not they qualify for the automatic independent status. The last group that I'm discussing is foster youth. Foster youth is any child who is in foster care between the ages of 14 and 18 years of age, or any person 18 to 21 years of age who's transitioning out of foster care and receiving independent living services. So that's different from they're foster children and they foster youth. So foster children are under the age of 14, foster youth are the older bunch that receive the transitional support as they transition into transition into adulthood, excuse me. So before we talk about what programs exist and the nitty-gritties, let's talk about what are the post-secondary options that may exist in general. There are many options, and a lot of people aren't aware what they all are, so I think it's important to talk about what are the options. Students can enlist into the military for active duty, or they can go in some sort of reserve unit if they're considering pursuing post-secondary education. Students can also go directly into the world of work if they're interested. They can pursue vocational and technical training where they can get a certificate, a diploma, in some sort of credentialized field, usually a trade area, short term. Sometimes there are 6 weeks, they can go up to 24 months, but the idea is that they're receiving training to go directly into the world of work. Also, students can participate in an apprenticeship, which is an opportunity to be trained for a job and paid while they're receiving the training by a journeyman. And then when they're done receiving the training, they can go on and be a fully licensed journeyman to do the work. Students can pursue education at a community or junior college, which gives them a 2-year degree. They can receive an applied associate's degree from a community college, which is it's an associate's degree that prepares them for the world of work. So they get the applied part is that they're taking hands-on classes to actually be skilled for a particular job. Whereas the general ed associate's degree is for students who are taking 2 years worth of coursework to then transfer to the 4-year school. Lastly, students can pursue a college or university to get a 4-year bachelor's degree or a master's degree or professional degree, but they build on one another. So a student will need to have a 4-year bachelor's degree before they pursue a master's degree, and a 4-year bachelor's degree before they pursue a professional degree. So they have to start with a bachelor's degree to move forward. It's also important to not only know what are the post-secondary options, but how much financial aid is available now? Like, how much financial aid even exists that these students even have access to? Well, in 2021-2022, it's reported that federal student aid had about $234 billion in federal financial aid that were awarded in the form of grants, loans, and work study. In the state of Virginia, we awarded $84 million in state aid during the 2021-2022 school year as well. That's down from the year before. Be mindful, 2022-2021 was a COVID-19 school year. So schools receive additional funding for financial aid as well as operational support from the state. So that number shifted for a reason. But still, $84 million available for students who are in the state of Virginia to attend schools here in Virginia. Continuing on this information around background stats, excuse me, in 2019-2020, it's reported that about 41,000 unaccompanied homeless youth actually completed their FAFSA. So they completed their FAFSA, but of the students who applied, 529 are in the state of Virginia, which is a small number in comparison to the amount of students we know who potentially qualify as unaccompanied homeless youth. Specifically, 34,000 students who completed the FAFSA requested homeless consideration, yet their applications stayed outstanding. They were never given the designation. They had undetermined, their request was never given an answer. But we're glad that the rules around the FAFSA are changing this year, where schools are required to give an answer within 2 months. I want to say they have to give an answer within 60 days, so that students won't have outstanding applications like this. So we're really excited about that. So how do Virginia students access financial aid in general? This process will definitely be the same for students who are experiencing housing instability and students who are in care. But I just think it's important to kind of just tell you what the nuts and bolts are, so that if a student may encounter one of these or may fall into a category that will require them to complete one of these applications, you know what they are. So the first, the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, provides access to federal aid for U.S. citizens, federal and state financial aid. The CSS profile is a supplemental financial aid application that the College Board created. This gathers additional financial information about the family for schools who have a lot of money. These schools that require the CSS profile have deep pockets and want to make sure they're giving money to the right students. So they're collecting additional information to be sure that they are awarding money to those who are in the most need. This is not required for every school. It depends on the schools that the student is applying to. If their list of schools does not require a CSS profile, then ignore it. But if it does require it, the student must submit a CSS profile, and the school must be listed on the student's FAFSA for them to be considered for financial aid at that school. Next, the VASA is the state financial aid application for students who are not U.S. citizens. This is a new application that came about last year, but it provides access to that state aid for students who are not U.S. citizens. This group does not have access to federal financial aid, and before the VASA, they didn't have access to the any Virginia state aid either. So we're excited that this application gives them access to some aid, as well as Virginia tuition equity, which means that non-U.S. citizens who meet the criteria will qualify for in-state tuition at any public school throughout the state of Virginia. Next, Virginia domicile form is required for most of the public colleges, universities, so that they can determine if a student has in-state, or that they can get that in-state tuition rate and also be considered for those in-state grant programs. Lastly, a verification form may be required by a student. Essentially, what it means is that the federal government or your school may ask you to confirm or verify some information that you submit on the FAFSA. So they will tell you a question and say, we want you to verify this question and answer. And they'll give you a list of documents that satisfy their requirement. Just provide it for them as soon as they let you know. This process, verification has been suspended for the past couple years. We anticipate it's going to be ramped up very soon, especially with the changes coming to the FAFSA, but we just want you to know what it is and just kind of how to respond. So, as I mentioned earlier, students who are considered unaccompanied homeless youth have the best chances of getting the independent status if they have their homeless designation from their McKinney-Vento liaison at their high schools. And so these students can get a letter verifying their that they are homeless from a director of a homeless shelter, director of runaway and homeless youth program, a school district McKinney-Vento homeless liaison, as well as anyone from a TRIO program. That's one of the new additions that they've added to this list. So they can actually get a letter designation from, provide this information to the MV liaison, who can get them the homeless designation while they're in school. In college, though, they can get an additional letter from the TRIO coordinator in order to be considered for that independent status. If a student's not able to get a letter from one of the people who's listed here, the financial aid administer professional judgment to make a decision about whether or not the student will get the automatic independent status. But for students who are homeless but accompanied by their parents, or students who, for whatever reason, aren't able to get that automatic independent status, those students are still considered to be dependent students and will have to provide parental information for their FAFSA. The challenges with this is that it could potentially limit students' access to the maximum amount of aid that's available, particularly if a student really is an unaccompanied homeless youth. If they really are at risk of being homeless, they are working independently, they are not living at home because they don't feel safe, those students should really lean into the process to get that automatic independent status. So just as a reminder, that status is made available to students who are unaccompanied homeless youth, not youth who are accompanied by an adult, but unaccompanied homeless youth, and those who are in foster care since the age of 13. Those students are not required to disclose any parental information, and they get an additional $4,000 in unsubsidized loans in their financial aid package. So just for your information, it's important to know what is the financial aid that is available. I know those of us who are doing college access work know already how much financial aid may be available. But for those of you who are more familiar with working with students who are experiencing housing instability or working with foster youth, you may not know what the aid limits are or what's available in terms of financial aid. So this is the aid that's available from the federal government. It's need-based, but if a student who is experiencing housing instability is an unaccompanied homeless youth or a youth who is in care since the age of 14, they will qualify as an independent student and have access to this aid. They will access $7,300 in a Pell Grant. They can access up to $4,000 in the Supplemental Education Opportunities Grant, but the average award we see is about $1,500. They also have access to a subsidized loan for $3,500 for their first year in school, and then that amount increases for $1,000 every year up until their junior year, and then they receive $5,500 for junior and senior year. And then the direct unsubsidized loan, they receive, as I mentioned, the $4,000 increase. Dependent students receive a $2,000 unsubsidized loan. Independent students have access to $6,000 in an unsubsidized loan. And lastly, this population of students have access to a work-study grant, which the maximum award is about $5,000, but on average, I've seen about $1,800 in the work-study awards. Anticipated challenges that, changes that we're expecting that are going to be impactful to unaccompanied homeless youth and foster youth that we are anticipating from the FAFSA. One, the presumption of subsequent year eligibility. So in the years past, students who got professional judgment from financial administrators at their college to be given, got the judgment in order to be given the independent status, every year they had to go through the process all over again to get the independent status. Well, with the changes to the FAFSA coming this year, it's the presumption that if they were eligible the year before, they're going to be eligible this year too. So they don't have to go through the process over and over again. 1 year is enough. And if they transfer to different institutions, the institution that they transfer to can assume the same presumption as well, although they could still ask the student to provide them with the documentation for their professional judgment process too. But the code just says that they can accept the information from another school that the student is transferring from. There's an expanded list of qualified programs, persons, and documents that verify unaccompanied homeless youth status or foster care status. As I mentioned earlier, a TRIO director is one that fits into that category. So that's super duper helpful. Also, one of the new changes, financial aid administrators are now required to accept documentation from unaccompanied homeless youth that essentially show that they are homeless. And they are required to accept it whether or not they agree with why the student is homeless. They can only present a challenge if the documentation is in direct conflict with other information on the FAFSA. If it is not in conflict, the school's financial aid administrator has to accept it and give the student the independent status. And they also have to make that information available to the student in a timely fashion, as I mentioned earlier, within the 60-day window. So we're excited about these changes because it removes a whole lot of barriers. It makes this pathway a little bit easier for many of the students that we support. So now we talked about federal. What's available in terms of the state of Virginia? What are we awarding here? So the state of Virginia, we offer two need-based financial aid programs, the Virginia Commonwealth Award and Virginia Tuition Assistance Grant. Commonwealth Award students can receive almost $4,000. Tuition Assistance Grant, they receive up to $13,000. You see the requirements there for those students. But again, students who don't have income, who qualify for independent status, will receive usually receive the max aid. or max up to the cost of attendance for their school. I guess I should say that. The 2-year college transfer grant incentivizes students who spend 2 years at a community college and then transfer to a 4-year school. They receive a $1,000 scholarship if their EFC is less than 12,000 and their GPA is a 3.0 or higher. Be mindful they're changing the term from EFC to SAI. I just want to be sure I'm using the correct terminology. It's not correct on the slide, but it's SAI Student Aid Index. A $1,000 renewable scholarship is renewable for an additional year. Next, the Virginia Workforce Credential Grant is the only grant on this list that doesn't require FAFSA completion. Essentially, students will apply to be to programs like FastForward for the short-term credential program. They're paired with a career coach who will then help them identify what internal, like Virginia internal grant application they should complete. And many of these programs are covered at up to 100% for folks. So it's important to work with that career coach to complete that grant application to get your program paid for. And some of the programs even offer, I'm struggling with allergies. Some of the programs even have $1,000 completion stipend for those who finish the program and finish the certification tests, exams. Lastly, for students interested in pursuing private schools in the state of Virginia, you have Virginia Guaranteed Assistance Grant. The only requirement is that they complete the FAFSA or the VASA, and then they have $4,000 that in financial aid that's offered to them. So just to be clear, the first 4 grants are for those who are going to public colleges in the state of Virginia, and then the last one is for those who are going to a private college in the state of Virginia. But it's important to acknowledge that there are limitations to the way financial aid can be applied. For federal aid, students can use any of the federal aid programs to fund any of the cost of attendance expenses. So they can use it for tuition, required fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation, and even personal expenses. However, in the state of Virginia, students are not allowed to use state financial aid towards personal expenses or transportation expenses. They can use it for all the other areas, but those particular areas. Virginia state aid can only be used for expenses that you pay directly to the school and books and supplies. But there are some other programs that are around that could stand in a gap to offset the cost of a college education or post-secondary education for these particular populations of students. I'm excited to share information about it. One is the Chafee Program. The Chafee Program is a federally funded program. Each state manages their own Chafee Program through their DSS, Department of Social Services. And Virginia's program is called Project Life. I love my colleagues at Project Life, such a phenomenal program. And Project Life is managed through UMFS, the United Methodist Family Services, excuse me. And they provide independent living support and programming for foster youth and youth who are transitioning out of care. But the particular Chafee program offers 2 grants. And Project Life manages the grants and also manages the programming that supports this youth. And so those grants are the independent grant and the ETV grant. The ETV grant, ETV voucher is generally what we call it, is for youth who are in care after the age of 14 or they exited care after 16 due to adoption or guardianship. And those who are up to the age of 26 in the state of Virginia, they can get $5,000 a year for 5 non-consecutive years. 5 years, they can receive $5,000 for education and training opportunities. This could be used for any of the cost of attendance expenses or supplies that they may need. But for those grayed out areas that the state of Virginia is not covering that I mentioned earlier, like transportation and personal expenses, students who are in foster care transitioning out of aid could use ETV to offset those particular costs. The Independence Grant is for youth who are between the ages of 14 and 18 who are transitioning out of care or they're in fostering futures. And those students receive an independent living stipend of $730 a month until they reach the age of 21. The only stipulation is they have to be employed 80 hours a month or in some sort of training program or college program, and they receive $730 a month until they turn 21. Another great program, and this program I really believe is underutilized for sure. WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act, is a federal act that essentially aligns some funding to provide direct-to-work training support for U.S. citizens throughout this country. The WIOA programs are generally managed through each state's kind of unemployment office. In the state of Virginia, it's managed through the CareerWorks program. But they provide support, job attainment support for those who are not enrolled, who are looking for support and training, but are not enrolled in a four-year college. So two programs, the youth program and the adult program, most of the opportunities in the programs are the same. It's just a little bit additional support available in the youth program around mentoring and graduation to help them get through high school if they're struggling. So the youth program for folks 17 to 24, youth who are not enrolled in school, they may have graduated or they dropped out, but they cannot be enrolled in school. They are either low income, basic skills deficient, justice involved, running pregnant or disabled, and foster youth are considered to be justice involved. So they could definitely use this program, or any student, to be honest, who you think falls into this category. They offer some phenomenal support. If folks don't fit into that category, then the adult program is available for anyone who's eligible to work, who is over the age of 18. But what are the services that are available? Both programs offer one-on-one career coaching, access to online learning and assessment tools, job search, job readiness workshops, interview and resume development support, GED and adult basic education support, scholarships for training in in-demand areas. So they really, if you're enrolled in one of those programs where there may be a balance for you to pay, WIOA will provide you a scholarship to close that gap. Paid internships, opportunities to like shadow folks and learn about the jobs and get paid while you're doing it. On-the-job training, financial assistance for transportation, clothes, training books, materials, and fees. We know fees come up in this process while folks are preparing for jobs and preparing for training in the training pipeline, and WIOA provides financial support. They also provide one-time emergency payments. If you need help with car repairs or medical bills or utilities that may come up, WIOA offers support, and they even offer follow-up services for up to 12 months after the first day of work. So great program available to anyone who's eligible to work in the country, and in Virginia is managed through our CareerWorks office. The youth program, the additional parts include academic support, so helping building up the math and reading skills, particularly if they need help getting through high school or getting a GED, and then additional mentoring around like leadership development. Another great program is the Virginia Department of Labor and Industries Registered Apprenticeship Program. This is a great program that allows a student to earn money while they're actually being trained for a job. Students can receive a nationally recognized credential that they can carry with them to different jobs once they finish this apprenticeship program. But it's a great way for students to earn income and receive training at the exact same time. Here's the link to the openings of apprenticeships that are available throughout the state of Virginia. This list is about a couple weeks old, but the areas that have openings now, and in machinery, HVAC, plumbing, facilities management, software engineering, masonry, winery management, and aesthetics. There are tons of different options in so many different fields, and folks are being paid while they're training. So I encourage students, if it's the right fit for them, by all means, take advantage of it. And students who are receiving Chafee funding can still do apprenticeship program and receive Chafee funding. Another great program is FastForward for students who want some training but may not be able to, won't be able to pursue a four-year education. They may want a short-term training credential, excuse me. In the state of Virginia, they have this phenomenal program that's managed through the Virginia Community College System called FastForward. And essentially, the different regions of the state have in-demand careers. Those are careers that they really, jobs that they really need filled. And so the state of Virginia has funded training programs through the community college to get folks ready to go into those fields. And so there's 6 to 12-week training programs that can be both in-person and virtual. Students receive support from a career coach to help them through the process of figuring out the program they want to enroll into. Many folks who come from a household where the income is less than 100K will be covered at 100% for the program, and some students get a stipend when they complete it. I mentioned this program for the Workforce Credential Grant, but essentially this is a specific program. And there's a link if you'd like to learn more. A program that's specifically helpful for foster youth in the state of Virginia, also through the Virginia Community College System, is Great Expectations. Great Expectations provides individualized support, a support coach for foster youth who are enrolled in community college here in the state. They receive academic and financial assistance to get through the associate's degree process, and they're available at every community college across the state. If you want to learn more, click the link there. But again, it's a phenomenal support for foster youth who are starting at community college. There are some students that I encourage to go to community college just because it's more supportive. Some spaces are more supportive for them than going to four-year schools. So it could be a phenomenal resource for the right student. So tips on applying to college for students who are experiencing housing instability or in care. What should you be thinking about? One, when you're looking for a school, there should be resources that should be there that are going to help you be successful. This is kind of a wish list, but these are things that have been useful for students in this population in getting through school. One, on-campus housing during breaks, because many of them couldn't depend on stable housing outside of their college campuses. So schools that have a lot of international students, I've noticed, offer year-round housing, so on-campus housing during breaks. Also, institutional financial assistance. So if students run upon some challenges and need some financial support, the school has internal financial support for students. One-on-one, no-cost tutoring, opportunities to be supported by graduate students or other students who are providing tutoring for free for you to help you build up those areas where you're struggling in. A supportive community of trust and understanding, where students don't feel judged about their life experiences or things that they've gone through, but they feel supported, they feel comfortable in that space of a school is definitely something you should be aware of. Devoted campus-based staff to support student needs. Many schools actually have first-gen coordinators and one-stop coordinators who have an awareness of the different programs that exist to help students who are experiencing homelessness or students who may be at risk of dropping out of school, or students who are struggling to meet their own basic needs. So campuses that have devoted staff to lean into providing additional support and guiding students towards resources is going to be paramount in getting through this experience. And lastly, targeted career development opportunities that are specifically geared towards students learning what's necessary for them to be prepared for the world of work outside of college. Connecting them with alumni, giving them opportunities to network because they don't have those connections before starting school. So specific career development that is aware of what students need to be successful, but also aware that they may not have had any of that exposure before college. Other next steps, I'm sorry. I realized I forgot the column to the left. Get help. Please get help if you need it. There are plenty of opportunities available, plenty of free resources available and supports like us at the College Place. So please get help if you need it. If you need an adult to walk you through this process, there's not a shortage of support available. So please reach out. Also, get a hold of your transcripts. If you know that you've attended several high schools while you have been since 9th grade, make sure that you can get a hold of those transcripts, review them, make sure it has information. The information there is accurate. The grades there are accurate, but make sure when you apply to college, you're going to need transcripts from every year you've been in high school, from every school you've enrolled in high school. So make sure that you can access those transcripts. Also, make sure you complete the appropriate financial aid application. If you're a U.S. citizen, you just need to complete the FAFSA. If you're not a U.S. citizen, but you've been in Virginia for 2 years, you can potentially qualify for Virginia state aid by completing the VASA. But please make sure you complete the application and complete it as soon as you can. If students are getting this independent status and they don't have to report parent income, it could get them through that application in 10 minutes or less. But please make sure you prioritize getting it complete. A lot of financial aid, particularly merit aid, is first come, first serve. So get that application done as soon as you can. And lastly, own your story. I know that students have different experiences that they hold really close to their vest and they don't want to necessarily share it, and for good reason. But there are many opportunities and programs and scholarships that are beneficial for students if there's an awareness about them having certain experiences. So I encourage students to find a way to own their story, or find ways to own aspects of their story that they feel comfortable sharing, so that they can access resources that are going to be helpful to them. People won't know your story if you don't share it with them. But with that awareness, people will then know that you need help, and they'll be willing to step in to support it in whatever way they can. But they have to know. So college is not like high school. You have to be able to self-identify. And in a lot of cases, no one will know that you have a need. No one will know that you're in certain circumstances if you do not disclose. So I encourage you to own your story and harness that power as you move through this college experience. All right, now to the next step. Take a career interest inventory. I really encourage students to start with the career interest inventory, this scientific tool that identifies, that allows you to share your skills and talents and interests, and then it identifies careers that will be a good fit for you. Use this to really start your career exploration journey. Identify 3 careers that you want to learn more about, and then connect with professionals who are doing that job. LinkedIn makes so many people accessible for free. So reach out to professionals and learn more about that career. Ask them, can you shadow them? Ask them, can you be an intern for them? But network with professionals in that particular area. Determine the most appropriate post-secondary pathway for your career choice. And then pursue that pathway. Don't feel like you have to choose college because everyone's choosing college. Choose whatever pathway makes sense for your career choice. Develop a timeline for completing your admissions and financial aid application. It's going to be senior year is going to be heavy. It's a heavy lift. You have to do senior graduation requirements. Students are preparing for prom and homecoming. You have to complete your college applications, scholarship applications, your FAFSA, your CSS profile if necessary. So it's going to be helpful for you to create a timeline, a schedule for how you're going to move through senior year and get those applications done. If it's helpful, and I encourage this, tap into trusted adults. Inform them of your plans. One, they want to celebrate you, but then 2, they can hold you accountable for getting the applications done in a timely fashion. There could be a second set of eyes to review your documents before you submit it to a school or to a scholarship awarding organization, but it could always work in your best interest to have someone else to champion you, but walk alongside you in this process. So I hope this information was helpful. I hope I gave you some tools to use, some insight into just kind of what the process for going to college or preparing for college is going to look like for students who are experiencing housing instability and students who are in care. If ever I could be of support, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are here to help at the College Place. Any service and support from us is completely free. We just really want to be a resource. So you can see my contact information there on the screen. Any student who needs help can by all means reach out, but I really encourage students who are experiencing housing instability and students who are experiencing foster care, please reach out. There are so many options available to you, and I want you to make sure that you know the options so you can make informed decisions about what's next. So thanks again for your time. Have a great rest of your day.